Alrighty. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Kylie and the whole organizing team for having me. It is a pleasure. This is my second time talking to this group, so for those of you who have heard me speak in the past, I hope this is not repetitive. I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about my work with Power BI and what I do using data for good. So I work primarily with nonprofits and government clients, and it is my goal to help organizations be truly data-driven. And a big part of that journey has been using the Power Platform and also helping people understand that the barrier to entry with data and data literacy and data use is actually much lower than we would expect. So I often hear from people, oh, I'm not a data person, or, data is intimidating to me, or it's scary, or, that's too much work, that's not what I do. But I think what I'd like for us to do during this presentation is to take a look at an end-to-end solution that we built using the Power Platform. And we're going to demo it from beginning to end. So if you guys are on your own machines and you're able to follow along, I welcome that. And then I just want to show a little bit of the analysis in Power BI. So we're going to be talking about a specific use case where we used Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI to save lives out in the field with clinicians. So let's get started. First thing I want to say is that I am not monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions, please feel free to jump in at any time. I find these webinars really challenging when we can't interact with each other. So please feel free to take yourselves off mute and jump in if you have any questions. Just a little bit about myself. My background is in public health, and I've been working with nonprofits and government for about the past 5-ish years. I currently work at an organization called Blue Raster, and we build GIS and BI applications for nonprofits and government. I'm also a trainer, so I train on Excel and Power BI. I'm a lifelong learner. I know it is now back to school time for a lot of your children, so I thought the school picture was appropriate. And then just a little bit about me. My favorite pre-COVID hobby was that I like to do trapeze over in Navy Yard. So I'm gonna run away and join the circus if data does not work out for me. All right, so what are we going to talk about today? I want to briefly just give you a little bit of background about the organization that I worked with. I think it makes the solution feel even that much more impactful. I'm going to talk about the team that was responsible for building the solution, and then what the issue was we were trying to solve, and then we're going to jump into a demo and build. So I do not have a lot of slides, and I am going to try to keep a close eye on time. Following Prashant's presentation, this presentation is going to not be quite as technical, but if you have technical questions, please feel free to ask. You can also ask any licensing questions or any questions that you have. I think with the number of people that we have on the line, we should be able to answer most, if not all, of your questions. Alrighty, so let's get started. Just very quickly, the organization that this solution was built for is the Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation. This organization has a lot of meaning to me. The woman who founded the organization actually contracted HIV from a blood transfusion in the early 80s after giving birth to her daughter. And she unknowingly passed the virus to her 2 children, and her daughter did not survive and her son did. So Elizabeth and her daughter Ariel are no longer with us, but her son Jake is, and he does a lot of advocacy for the organization. So working for this organization was a really special time in my career, mostly because it was really mission driven, and every single thing we did every single day was all towards ending pediatric HIV. So it was a great place to work. One other thing I want to mention, just thinking about like licensing and building these solutions, what I do every day is try to build low cost or no cost solutions. So in a lot of the Power Platform licensing, there are, different tiers of licensing that you can purchase, and that different kinds of organizations have available to them, and different things that you can test. Some are more pricey than others, but if anyone on the line ever works with a nonprofit entity, Microsoft has enormous discounts for nonprofits. So we were able to build this solution almost entirely for free. The only thing that we paid for in the solution that we're about to demo was for Power BI licensing, which was heavily discounted. So if you are a type of person that you're with a nonprofit or an association or the government, and you're trying to build low budget solutions, I'm your gal. Let's talk. Oftentimes I feel like my solutions may be almost like a bit duct taped together, but they work and they serve their purpose. And in this case, the purpose was to end pediatric AIDS. Sorry, I'm getting a little off topic here. But so this organization, Elizabeth Glaser Pediatric AIDS Foundation, basically works in sub-Saharan Africa and India, providing evidence-based programming. They do research, and then they also do advocacy to get laws, rules, and regulations changed to support the implementation of HIV programming. While I was working at EGPAF, I was a member of this Informatics team, which is a very funny word to me, but our whole job was to track the clinical data from all of the programming and all of the health facilities that we were supporting. So what was really incredible was that we were working with over 5,000 facilities in the countries that we were working with, but these health facilities are managed by the Ministry of Health. So it was not our job to come in and to say, okay, you as the Ministry of Health should be using the Power Platform. That is not what we did. You'll see in a subsequent slide that the Ministry of Health is still using paper forms for most of their data collection. So we essentially provided an add-on service so that we could capture that data electronically, and then so that decision makers could access it both here in the US, but also at the country level, folks within the Ministries of Health, and also the country level executives that we had on our team. So this picture here is actually a data entry clerk who is entering the data from the registers, and they do this on either a weekly or monthly basis. So there is some electronic data capture that's happening, but it depends on where the facility is. Do they have electricity? Do they have connectivity? And then, of course, is there the computer literacy there to be able to use the programs, do the computers work, all that jazz. So there are a number of different barriers that we were running up against. Other kinds of interesting issues that we worked with, and something that's particularly interesting in this case, is that all facilities do not have electricity, and all facilities do not have internet connectivity at all times. So we had to be able to build this data collection tool so that it could be used offline. And this original solution that we built, we used, gosh, I think it was 3 years ago that we built it. Is that possible? 2 years ago? But so Power Apps was still a little bit in its infancy, and we had a really interesting time learning how to build that solution that could be used offline, and it was really amazing. But what you'll see now is that when we go through building the solution, it is almost child's play. It's so easy to build this, and that work in building the Power App, using Power Automate, and building the Power BI report could all be done globally, and that data could be accessed within 1 minute of entry by anyone in the world. So I cannot say enough about how the Power Platform impacted our work. I used to joke in the past that I spent a lot of time just copying and pasting between spreadsheets. That was my job. I was like an analyst of programs. And so, when you're thinking of having data from 5,000 health facilities, and then someone asks you, okay, can I see how many patients we're testing in each country by region, and then also by facility, and then let's break that down by sex, and age. I spent a lot of time dinking around in Excel, copying and pasting, collating data, and using the Power Platform, specifically Power BI in this case, completely changed what I do. And it actually changed my whole career path. But it was a complete game changer to use any element of the Power Platform. And then once it came together as the Power Platform, it totally revolutionized our work. All right, so the problem is that executive level folks are always asking for data. They want the most recent data at their fingertips, which is really challenging because we know that that data is literally coming from a patient chart that is then recorded in a patient register. So it's like a register book of all of the patients, and then, you know, whether or not they're HIV positive, if they have TB, if they have other co-infections, all of that goes into a register book. All of that then goes into a paper summary form, and all of that then probably gets on a bus and goes to a district office where that data is then entered into the computer. So the data pipeline is complex and it's very, very manual. So what we were able to do with this solution was to automate the process, which is sweet. So I'm not going to go into this too much, but the main challenge of what we were doing in the past to get data to the decision makers was all using paper as the source. I wanted to show an example of what these register books look like because it is just truly amazing to me how this is done. So we've you know, cleared out some of the identifying information in this shot, but what you can see is that each row in the ledger book represents a patient. And so then you've got their sex, their age, their diagnosis, all different information about the patient. And then a nurse or a data entry clerk has to take this register book and count up the number of males, the number of females, the number of people under 15, the number of people over 15. And it's with the donor requirements and also with the type of programming that we were trying to do, the number of different ways in which you have to slice and dice the data is, I think at one point there were over 800 different distinct indicators. It's truly bananas. But so what you'll see with this Power Platform solution is that we were able to simplify that a little bit. Okay, so what was the solution? We built an end-to-end solution using the Power Platform. So we did data collection using Power Apps. The back end of that Power App solution was a SharePoint list. So that is one of the level 1 or first level connectors. That's no added cost to your license. We then access that data using Power BI, and we set that up using a streaming data set, which we're going to do all together right now. And then we automated the whole process using flows in Power Automate. So let's go ahead and jump in. But before we jump into the demo, are there any questions or comments so far?
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, but this sounds great. We're excited.
Okay, beautiful. All right, so we are going to take this from the very beginning, and let me just get rid of this little formula bar thing. How do you get rid of that presenter bar at the top?
I wish I knew.
It's in the way of my tabs. Okay, I'm gonna ignore it for now. Okay, so what I want to demonstrate is I've got kind of a little pre-baked solution here that I'm gonna just show you, and then we're gonna build it all together. And we're gonna do this all in the next 15 minutes, and then we'll have a good amount of time for Q&A and discussion. So the first thing that we need to do is to set up our backend, structure of the data that it is that we want to collect. So here we're going to create a SharePoint list, and we are then going to click on the button to create a Power App. It is as easy as that. Okay, we then are going to have a Power App where we're able to enter data. From there, that data is going to get sent into a Power BI streaming data set, which we're going to set up together. And then what we'll have is a report. So in this case, I just put in some sample data, but you can see, at these 3 hospitals, we had these number of responses, and then we can build some visuals out for the solution. So let's jump in and let's start from scratch. So I'm going to just jump into my SharePoint site, and I'm going to create a new SharePoint list. My computer is a little bit slow on the response right now, so forgive me if I'm going slow, but we're going to just call this afternoon demo. And we'll create our list. Okay, and now we're going to add some columns. Now, for the purpose of this demo, we're going to keep it really, really simple. We're going to assume that we want to know how many individuals were tested for HIV and how many individuals tested positive. And then we'll look at that by sex. So we'll look at the name of the facility, males and females, those who were tested for HIV and those who were tested positive. Now, one thing I just want to mention that I failed to mention before, if children are undiagnosed, living with HIV and undiagnosed, the chance that they will die before the age of 2 is nearly 50%. So we want to make sure that every single child that comes through a health facility is seen, that they get an HIV test, and that they receive their results. Something that's really interesting, I think this has very interesting parallels with COVID. Right now in the US, if we get a COVID test, oftentimes the turnaround time from the testing to receiving your results is more than the whole course of having COVID, right? So maybe you get a test on a Monday and you don't get your results to the following Monday. That's not super effective, obviously. With HIV, we have the same issue. So we want to make sure that those who are getting tested are also getting their results. So I just wanted to emphasize how critical it is that we get this information to the decision makers at the right time so that they can then say, okay, we know we have 2 new positive infants at this health facility, and we know that we need to get more pediatric drug formulations to that facility, for example. So just want to bring that home. Okay, so let's create our SharePoint list here. I'm just going to create a couple new columns. So the first column I'm going to create is going to be female tested. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to add a column. Let me just clear this out really quick. It's apparently my first day using SharePoint. So we're going to add another column, and we're going to call this female tested. And hopefully, as we're walking through this demo, you guys can start to think of some use cases where this may work for you, or if you are volunteering with an organization that needs tech assistance and you can think of how this solution might work for them. I really want to make sure that this is applicable. All right, so we're going to add female tested and female positive, and then we'll do the same with males. In my experience in working with SharePoint lists, you definitely want to avoid spaces in the column headers. You all have a lot more experience with SharePoint than I do, so if anyone wants to speak to that, please feel free. But I learned the hard way that it made writing back to Power Apps a little bit more difficult. Okay, so here we go. We've got the structure of our SharePoint list. This is going to be what Power Apps is going to write back to. So we're just using this for data collection, essentially. Now, I have no idea what the composition of this group is. Is everyone already building and using Power Apps, or are there anyone on the line who's not yet using Power Apps?
Good question. So we're all traditionally, oh, there's my face, very big. We're all traditionally Dynamics. So I think most people probably have a little bit of Power Apps experience, but not everyone does.
Okay, great. So hopefully You guys will find this next piece of the demo super awesome. So if you are working in SharePoint and you've got your SharePoint list, Microsoft has literally made this child's play. It's so amazing. All you have to do is click on this Power Apps button here, and we're going to create an app. I'm going to call this, again, Afternoon Demo Data Collection. I've also learned the hard way of we don't want to name everything the exact same in every single application because that confuses me. And we're going to let Power Apps do its thing. It's going to set up the connection between SharePoint and Power Apps, and it's also going to give us a very basic layout for a data collection tool. Now, what you will see if and when you decide to use Power Apps is that you can customize this in 1,000,001 ways. It's very easy to customize. You can give people a nice landing page. You can add in, you can connect it to the Office 365 users so that when somebody opens the app, it says, hello, Shannon, you're, entering data from the US, and, it can timestamp it. You can record all of that data, but it's very easily customizable. But what I want to demonstrate here is that with the click of one button, we are going to have this whole thing set up. So it's still working. It's doing a little bit of magic behind the scenes. And I can say, I know that when I first started working with Power Apps in particular, it was very intimidating. There was a lot of, I felt like I had to learn a new language almost, but the product has come so far in the past couple of years that it really is almost foolproof to work with. It's so nice. So what you can see now is Power Apps is getting, the Power Apps Studio all set up so that we can work and build in here, and it's going to give us a template. And you can see here on the left-hand side of the screen that this template is being created. This always seems to take much longer during a demo, of course. Those are the demo gods. All right, so what are we seeing here? Oh boy, my Zoom does not work properly with this setup, so I'm going to not do that. What we see here is the screen that we're looking at is our app that we just set up. Okay, this is the afternoon demo. When we add an item, it is going to be written back to this SharePoint list. Okay, so let's test this out. I'm going to test this out by just playing through the app. Okay, so I'm going to create a new item. This is going to be George Washington Hospital reporting. There are going to be, I don't know, 20 little girls that have been tested. Unfortunately, there's one positive. 30 males that have been tested. Unfortunately, there's one positive. We're not going to attach a file. That's just from the default. And we're going to click submit. Okay, now, where does this information go? In Power Apps, there's the concept of working with collections, which is like local storage within the app. And then that writes back to your data source. So in this case, this data goes right back to our SharePoint list. And there's our data. Okay, so we literally, in 5 minutes, we just built a data collection tool. For those of you that work with data or that like to work with data or want to work with data, one of my biggest gripes is often that the data is being entered in a format that we cannot control. So let's say you're asking for a date and a number and a text value. If someone is entering that data in Excel, you can lock up the cells as much as you really think that you can. However, people can still paste special over that data validation and break everything. So I really learned in my time working with this organization in particular that Excel really is not a data collection tool. And now the Power Platform makes it so easy to use Power Apps to collect your data, and you can lock it up in any way that you see fit. So we now have a data collection tool that can be deployed in the field. So this could be deployed out in health facilities in Africa on a phone. We could configure this to be used offline, and we could use this for our data collection. So this is super sweet. Okay, so this is steps 1 and 2 of the pipeline. We have our storage and we have our data collection tool. Now we actually need to jump into Power BI and to set up our streaming data set. So I'm going to jump into Power BI here. I'm going to go home. For those of you who are seeing Power BI for the first time, traditionally the way that Power BI reports or dashboards are developed is that we develop our dashboards and reports in Power BI desktop, and you connect Power BI desktop to your different data sources, and then you set up the automation all here in the service. When you're working with streaming data, you set everything up right here in Power BI in the web, in the service. Now, one just kind of quick thing to mention, the reason that we used streaming data in this case rather than using automated refreshes in Power BI from SharePoint to Power BI was because our end users, the people that needed the data, were very impatient. And they said, we do not want to wait until 5 p.m. to be able to look at this data. We want to know as soon as we enter the data, we need to be able to see it. So that's why we used a streaming data set. So this is not the only way to use Power BI. It is just what we did in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into my workspace in Power BI. Workspaces are the place where you build and collaborate and work on reports with other people. My workspace is just my own sandbox where I can build and test. And this is a pretty kind of a naked little tenant that I'm working on. There's not a lot in here. But what you can see here is that I have some reports that I've built, and then you can also see the data sets that I have built. So what I'm going to do here, is my Zoom going to work? No, it's not. Okay, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just add something new to my workspace, and I am going to add a streaming data set. Now, there are 3 different types of streaming data sets that you can use. This can get quite complicated, but what we're going to use is just the default, the API, and we're going to click next. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to name this data set afternoon demo data set, and then we're going to start defining our fields. Okay, so the first value from our SharePoint list is the facility name. So I'm going to go ahead and type in facility, and that is a text value. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my females who were tested. And I'm going to specify this value as a number. Now, something interesting is that in my SharePoint list currently for this demo, I did not specify these next 4 fields as numeric fields. I just said single line of text. So someone could add anything in there and they could theoretically break this. But for the point of the demo and to show you what we can build in Power BI, I'm going to specify these as a number. And the reason is the default functionality for a number in Power BI is that it takes that information and it aggregates it. It adds it all together, it sums it. So I want these to be numbers just so that we can build some kind of a visualization that's meaningful. All right, so I'm now going to add my positive females. It's always a test of my typing when I'm doing live demos. Next, we'll add males tested. I'm going to also specify that this is a number, and then finally we'll do our males that are positive. Positive. Spelling is hard. Okay, so here we go. Alrighty, now the key to making this work and to being able to locally store your data is that we have to turn this historic data analysis on. Now, when we are locally storing this data in Power BI, the back end of Power BI, I guess, is a simple way that you can say it. The back end of Power BI is Azure. So this data is being stored in an Azure data lake. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just click create. And I'm going to select done. So what you can see here now is I have a data set created, but there isn't anything in there yet. Now remember, we did add one entry into here already, but we did not have anything set up yet. So this entry is not going to be captured in this demo, and that's okay. We're going to add more to test it. All right, so we now have our streaming data set up. The next thing we need to do is to build our flow. So the first thing I'm going to do is to actually just jump to templates. And this is my all-time favorite thing about Power Automate. Just about anything you could want to build to make your life easier, there is a template for. So in this case, I'm just going to start typing Power BI. Okay, and we have all of these options that you can use with Power BI. I mean, there are so many. But what I'm going to do is, this one is, I think it was created by Brian Dang, which is why it's this classroom data, but we'll rename this. We're going to use this template, visualize classroom walkthrough data in Power BI. And the reason we are using this is because this is saying when a new item gets added to a SharePoint list, stream it to Power BI in real time. That's the key. Okay, now going back to how Microsoft has made this so easy for us, I just want to show you this is literally just clicking through the user interface. There is zero code required, and hopefully you find this as easy as I do. So it goes ahead and it authenticates. If it's an external app, you'll have to authenticate again, which is fine. So I'm going to click continue. All right, and from here in the UI, it asks me what I want to do. Okay, so when a new item is created in a SharePoint list, add rows to this Power BI data set. So now I have to tell it what I want it to do. And the beauty about this is that it can be completely dynamic. All right, and I'll show you what I mean by that. So the first thing is, what is the site address? Okay, so this is my demo site address of my SharePoint list. I'm going to add that in. And the SharePoint list name is Afternoon Demo. Okay, that was easy. Next step, let's add rows to my data set. So the workspace that I'm working with, again, is my workspace. Remember, this is my sandbox. If you're ever going to put anything into production or share or collaborate with anyone, you cannot do it from here. But just for the purpose of a demo, I will do that. All right, next it wants to know what is the data set that we're working with. So the order of how you set all of this up is important. You have to first set up your streaming data set and then build your flow. Okay, so I'm going to link to my afternoon demo data set. And the name of the table is real-time data. Now, if you had failed to toggle that button that said add historic data in the Power BI streaming data set, you would not see this option here. So just keep this in mind. If you want to use streaming data sets, you really have to toggle that on. So I'm going to get my real-time data. And then it's going to ask me, okay, what do you want to put in here? Okay, now these lists here are, sorry, this list of values here, facility, female tested, this is coming straight from the values that I manually entered into the Power BI streaming data set. So you can probably see already or start to think of what some limitations of this may be. If you're working with a lot of data, if you're working with data that needs to be transformed and you need to do a lot of calculations on it, a streaming data set is not your best option. In that case, if you've got huge data, you might want to use direct query where your Power BI is directly connected to the data, or you can just use the local storage with Power BI Desktop. But in this case, my user said we need to see this data immediately. So this is what we did. And in production, I think we had maybe 10 fields total. There were not a lot of fields. And I'm sure there is a limitation to the number of fields. I don't know what that is, but if anyone is curious, I can find that out for you. All right, so first things first, let's go ahead and make this dynamic. So the facility in this case is the title column from my SharePoint list. Let's just go ahead and remind ourselves what we're looking at, okay? So that's our title column. Oops. I've lost the plot. We're building a flow. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go down the list and I'm going to add my dynamic content. So next we've got females who are tested. Now, what I'm doing in here is the very most simple basic level of what it is that you can do. We can get so much more complex, but I really want to demonstrate how easy this is to do. And then once you've mastered doing it in this fashion, or if you're load smarter than me, which most of you probably are, you can get crazy really quickly. But we're just going to start with the most simple options. I'm going to remove this payload here, and I'm going to save my flow. So just to review here, this is it. This is our whole flow. Super duper simple. Okay. I'm going to click save. Oh, and you know what? Let's rename this thing just once it's done saving. All right, so while this is doing its thing, quick backtrack. We set up our SharePoint list. We set up our Power App. We set up our Power BI streaming data set. Now we're building our flow. And then the next thing we're going to do is just test this all, make sure it's working and writing to SharePoint. And then we're going to build ourselves a Power BI report. Okay, looks like it has saved. Let's rename this afternoon demo flow. All right, we're going to test this baby. Now, I'm going to perform the trigger action. There are no previous runs for this flow, so I'm going to perform the trigger action. We're going to save and test. And my trigger action is what? My trigger action is adding data to this data set. Thanks, Kylie. Sorry, I jumped in too quick. My trigger action is adding data to this data set, and we're going to simply do that by using our app. Now, the way this is set up, you could manually enter something in SharePoint, sure, in your SharePoint list, but the whole point of this solution is to not allow people to enter data in any crazy which way. We want the data to be clean, we want it to be proper. So let's go ahead and add a value, and we're going to call this Sibley Memorial. This is going to be, Sibley's a big hospital, so let's say there were 200 kids that were tested. Again, unfortunately, we had a couple of positives. We also tested 200 males, a couple of positives. Now we know we need to get these kids on treatment right away. We need to find them, okay? Once I click select or submit, we're going to jump back in now and we're going to check to see what happened with our flow. And you can see here that our flow ran successfully. Okay, super awesome. There are a couple of other places we can check now. So I'm going to go just back into my SharePoint list. I'm going to refresh this and just take a look at what's going on here. And here's our new entry. Okay, so I know, okay, yes, it's writing to the source. Now, the most important piece for me as a decision maker, as a person who's responsible for procuring drugs to get these kids on treatment, I need to see that data and I need it to be in a way that it is easy to digest and I can make a decision immediately. So that brings us to Power BI. Here we have our data set and we need to build a Power BI report. So a Power BI report is just those beautiful visuals that you can look at to make your decision. You know, there's a whole science and an art to each and every one of these products. This is just the piece of the puzzle that I'm most familiar with, so I tend to wax poetic about it. But we need to make sure that we are presenting the data visually in a way that enhances the data and allows people to make decisions right away. So what we're going to do is build this report. So it is so simple. We're just going to click on the little ellipses next to the data set. We are going to create a report. Okay, from here, what you see should look very similar to what you see in Power BI Desktop. Okay, this is just a blank canvas, and you can see over here on the right-hand side in your field pane that you have your real-time data query or data set. What I'm going to do very quickly, just to see if this is working, is I'm going to drop in my data into a table. Okay, now once again, I sound like a broken record, but just to underscore how easy this is to set up and to do, I literally just clicked a few buttons and here I have some data to look at. So barrier to entry is low. If you see the value in any of these products, whether it's for the current organization that you work for or a nonprofit that you volunteer with, or you just want to share this information with the world, barrier to entry is so low. I highly encourage you guys to just start playing around with it. And for those of you who already do use it, I'd love to hear how you're using it as well. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this just so that we have it saved. I'm going to call this Afternoon Delight. All right, and all I've added here, now this is not a good example of high quality data visualization. It's just a table, but this is going to be our basis for building. And now I want to test this again. I just want to see if this whole thing is working. So I'm going to add another record. And I'm going to make this one at Red Cross. I don't even know if Red Cross is a hospital, but we're just going with it. We're going to have fewer males this time, no positives. All right, so now since I set up my streaming data set, I have added only 2 records. Okay, now we can see here, I mean, it's not so obvious with this local example, but you can see here how if people are looking at those register sheets, rather than tallying, the number of patients and summarizing that all in a form, if people can do that and just put the information right into an app, we skip so many steps in that process of the data getting from the health facility to the Ministry of Health. So we're really speeding things up. All right, let's jump back into our report. I'm going to refresh. And voila, we have our next entry. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop there as far as the demo goes. Let me just recap very, very quickly, and then let's chat. So just to recap, just to go through the steps here. The first thing that you need to do is to build your app. I think I did that with maybe a total of 10 clicks. So I started with my SharePoint list, I clicked build app, and then I started testing. It was as easy as that. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is set up our streaming data set. Finally, we're going to build our flow, and then from there, you can build your beautiful Power BI report that helps people understand, what the data is. It's in real time, and they can use it right away. So with that, I think let's open it up for questions, comments. If anyone has thoughts of maybe how you would do this differently or how you could do it more efficiently, I'd love to hear that. So does anyone have anything to add?
Thanks, Shannon. I think that was really good. I really liked something you kind of skimmed over quickly was around the how your Power App can be offline, right? So you could, for people who don't have internet, they could be recording all of this in their Power App that goes into the collection, right? And then when they get on internet, then it will just magically sync up. So the data might not be available in real time, but it would be available as real time as possible instead of needing to wait for someone to enter it when they get on internet. So I think that's really cool. I also, go ahead.
Kylie, that was our main deciding factor in going with Power Apps for this solution, was that offline capability.
Yeah, it's awesome. I also dropped in the chat on the foundation website, they had some of those dashboards available. So I dropped that link in the chat if anybody wants to check out some of that stuff. And I think some of the numbers there of people being tested, so you can actually see who has been treated and able to get treatment, and mothers getting treatment before the child is even born. I think that's really cool to see. So, any other questions?
Can I put you guys on the spot? Is there anyone on the line who has not used any of these products at all? Power BI, Power Automate, or Power Apps?
We have to sit uncomfortably for a few minutes and see who will respond.
You could even just do the little raise your hand icon. Okay, it looks like everybody has used them, which is great. I cannot emphasize enough how with, data and, any of these, you guys are all technologists, so this doesn't seem as scary to us. But I work with a lot of nonprofit clients who say, like, I'm not a data person. I cannot possibly build this. I don't know how to do this. And just the barrier to entry is so low. So it looks like a few people have not yet used Power BI. And again, just like these other two Power Platform products, the barrier to entry is low. I actually have a resource list that I will drop in the chat for getting started with Power BI. And it's a list of about, I want to say like 10 or so free resources. And I list out what those resources are and, how many minutes of content it is and all of that. So I'll drop that in here for those of you that are interested in getting started.
I'm curious to ask everyone, if they're not using Power BI, what are they using?
Bots. No.
Yeah.
Liar.
We're still doing, the current project I'm on, we're still doing a lot of SSRS reports for, just the end users to consume. But Power BI is, as far as the executive level users and reporting out of Azure and stuff like that, we're using Power BI for that.
So I can answer this for some of our customers. You're going to love my answer. Excel and pivot tables.
Yeah.
Excel for reporting is not terrible. Excel for data collection is terrible. Personal opinion. Does not reflect the opinion of my employer.
And I think Ruth answered probably what's true for a lot of us. So they have an in-house SSRS/BI team. So like my company is using Power BI, but that doesn't mean that I'm using it day to day. Although I have used it a little bit because it's super fun. I texted Shannon the other day because I had been, it was called like the aquarium data visualizer or something. It was like, so all your data becomes fish swimming around. It was
and for
not
negative values, they flip upside down and become dead fish.
It was so great. It was not helpful at all for me knowing what my data was saying, but it was super fun. So Mike dropped the questionnaire in the chat, so make sure you do that for an extra entry into our prize drawing if you get the questions right. Oh, and Shannon shared the resource list, which I will also copy to save with the video and stuff.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much. This was fun, as always. I love doing these presentations. I'm really super lucky to get to build these kinds of solutions for organizations that I think really need them. And just one little plug I'd like to make, which sounds really difficult to do in this time, but I think all of us as technologists, we have a lot of value that we could add to nonprofit organizations. So I know, for example, Red Cross as an organization, a lot of the Power Apps that they've built over the last 3-ish years have all been built by volunteers. So if you're looking to get involved, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to point you in the right direction of some organizations, or we can just share stories and solutions, and I'd love to get in touch.